Okay, well, Sue, we've known each other for a little bit, and I was really glad to get you here on Greybeard. I wanted to get you on YouTube before anybody else did. That was really the purpose. You're so famous.
Infamous is more the word. Yeah, I wouldn't say famous. No.
So, Seaux Larreau, former 5th group guy, retired from 10th group.
10th. I retired from the headquarters.
Right, regiment.
Yeah, I was more of a 10th group guy.
You were at 5th group with us in the SIF, A15. Switched over to 10th group. I don't know why.
Went back to 10th group, yes.
Went back to 10th group.
Yes.
And then from there went to the regiment.
To the regimental headquarters.
Right. And then so on and so forth. So, but our connection is you and I got to, I was in SWIC at the time, and you were in 10th group, I guess, and we both met at A15.
Right. I was coming back into the Army in 2000 and 2001. Mm-hmm. They sent me to 5th group just to irritate me, and I think I made it back to 5th group and back from Sephardic about the same time you came back off your SWIC tour in July of 2001.
Right, and so we really only met because I went straight to Kuwait for that rotation there as soon as I got there, and we really didn't meet until after the towers fell, and we were in where were we? Masira Island.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the first time we met.
Well, I think we met each other before we got on the plane to go to Afghanistan.
Yeah. Go to Masira Island. Oman. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. But you had a life prior to that, okay? And where were you born? I know it was out west somewhere, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I was actually born in the eastern corner of Colorado, a little town called Ray, W-R-A-Y. And my father was an oil field worker and worked agricultural jobs, but he switched back and forth between the oil field. And my mother she was a farm girl, and she got pregnant with me in her senior year of high school.
Sinner.
Yeah, she was a sinner, and she was the valedictorian of her high school class,
Wow.
but she was not allowed to go through graduation because there was a little
there.
bump going on there.
That's bullshit.
Yeah. So I was born in Ray, Colorado, even though my father and mother were in Craig, Colorado, which is the western part of the state. He had come back for county fair, road and rodeos and that kind of thing. And I was actually there in Ray, Colorado when I was born, and they were staying at my cousin's house. So I have a lot of cousins around the eastern Colorado area. Yeah. So I was born there. And then my little brother was actually born in Craig, Colorado a year later. So I was born in August of 1963. He was born in September of 1964.
Okay, so that was quick.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my mother and my father actually got married. So they weren't
after that.
Yeah, they weren't quite married. They said, "Oh, there's 2 boys, so we better go ahead and get married." And funny how that happens.
Otherwise, they're going to get made fun of in school. Bastards.
Oh yeah.
So where'd you go to school?
I went to school in a lot of different states. I started out in Colorado, and my preschool years, ended up in Utah, Vernal, Utah, because my father was actually drafted. My mother turned in my father and his oil field crew had went out to Bakersfield, California, because they didn't want to work the wintertime in Utah.
Right.
So they all went out to Bakersfield, California, found a rig. They were working out there. They called for their wives to come meet them in California. And all of them had been deferred from the draft because they were married men and had children.
Okay.
And all their wives, while they were gone, turned them into the draft board. So My dad was told, you got to report to the draft board in California. So him and a guy named Leon Ross and another guy, Whitey, they all went. Two of them went to Vietnam, and Leon Ross went to Germany. Mm-hmm. While my father was in Vietnam, I stayed in Vernal, Utah, and my mom was kind of a hippie, kind of a war protester. So she was on the Front Range of Colorado, Boulder, Denver area.
Right.
And I stayed in Vernal, Utah with a woman named Mrs. Bland, and she took care of my brother and I while we were in our preschool years. And then when my father returned from Vietnam, I'd started school in Denver, Colorado, Denver, Arvada area. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started school there, and a very tumultuous relationship. My mother introduced my father to her boyfriend while he was in Vietnam, and then they officially got divorced. And then my mother, I guess my biological mother, was going through all kinds of trauma and emotional issues and everything like that. So my father convinced this woman that he needed to leave Albuquerque, New Mexico, and go pick up his two boys in Colorado. So they got married, just to make the courts satisfied that they were married, to pick us up. So we ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico for just a little while, and then we went back to Colorado where my biological mother was living. And we ended up in Denver. I can remember Gaylord Street. I was 5 or 6 years old, but we're in Gaylord Street, right there, downtown Denver. So by the botanical gardens were just being built, things like that. I can remember the Apollo 11 mission on television at school and everything. So we were downtown Denver.
Oh, sweet.
And it wasn't that sweet.
But you took me to Denver once. Remember we had what did we have there? Texas de Brazil there, wasn't it? Yeah, down in Denver.
Yeah.
Very hipster.
Yes, it was we're talking 1969 time frame. Lots of protests going on. Lots of the hippie movement was very strong. I tell everybody that Boulder, Colorado, is so liberal because that's where all the ugly hippie chicks couldn't get a ride to San Francisco. So they're all stuck there on the Front Range of Colorado. So that was some interesting times. And I didn't see a whole lot of my father until fourth grade. And then my brother and I went down to West Texas, Del City, Texas, and we did a year and a half on the farm down there in the middle of nowhere. It's 90 miles east of El Paso. So
Which is literally the middle of nowhere.
It is I think Del City, Texas, at the time it was a pretty good sized town. It had 3,000 people in the valley, but and we'll talk about that later. But it was a very agricultural center for mostly cotton, alfalfa, tomatoes, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And my brother and I were on the farm there, and we went to school in just a independent school district. Del City, Texas is about 3 miles from the New Mexico border. So, which is very interesting because it all played into our careers later, right? As not being the actual training area off a post or memorandum of agreement with the ranchers and everything. It was all training area since World War II for the Army there at Fort Bliss, Texas. So it turned out to be a great place to really understand what individual living was like, and they were pretty much settlers. The town was still on party lines. Sometimes you had electricity, sometimes you didn't. That kind of thing.
Party lines.
Yeah. So
I remember those. You had to pick up the phone and not so much on it. So we'll just wait till they got off of it.
Yeah, or you had to count how many rings were on the phone. You know exactly who the phone call was for.
Funny. So All right. So high school. Where did you do that at? Did you do that in Texas also?
No, I came back. My brother and I lived down there until my mother was remarried, and then we went up. Went back up to Colorado in the Golden Arvada area. I didn't see my dad again for another 4 years. Too expensive for him to pay child support, so we weren't allowed to visit our father for like 4 years, and then after a certain court case and everything, I went to visit my father my freshman year of high school, and I started high school. I decided that's where I was going to be. I was getting out of the city, getting out of the suburbs, and going back to the farm. So ended up going back to the farm in Dale City, Texas, and I did my freshman and sophomore year there. Real bad year. We lost the farm, and my father started working up in Gallup, New Mexico, for the uranium mines, and I ended up doing my junior year in Gallup, New Mexico, and then my father left the uranium mines and went back to work in the oil field, and I ended up in Roosevelt, Utah for my senior year.
Moving around a lot.
Yeah. I went to 4 different high schools in high school. So,
wow.
With a small stint, I did try to go back out and live with my mother for a little while, and she had moved to San Diego, California, and I did not fit in well at all in San Diego. So
I don't blame you.
Cowboy boots and
I was there for a week and I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it. However, I did try because remember when we worked with the SEALs at Area 4. Told them we were going to San Diego for vacation when we got back, and they were like, "You got to try the fish tacos." That's all they talked about was fish tacos in San Diego, which weren't bad. They're actually pretty good.
No, and I was in Imperial Beach High School, which was right down from Coronado Island, which we ended up going to quite often when I was on the scuba teams, and the lifestyle was just the culture was completely different for a kid wearing long sleeve shirts and cowboy boots.
Right.
I didn't fit in San Diego, and I'd sunburn under a reading lamp, But that's kind of where I was introduced to the military a little bit. I did a little bit of junior ROTC for the Navy.
Okay.
And I enjoyed that. But it only lasted a few weeks, and I ended up going to live with my dad in Gallup, New Mexico. But the whole time I was in high school, I was I really considered my stepmother to be my mother. She didn't have to take care of me, but she did. She did a real good job of taking care of me. So I got real close to my stepmother. And that's where after I become an adult and everything, if I would go home to visit anybody, it would usually be a stop in a little
I remember you mentioned
paved intersection in West Texas. So it was, and the town deteriorated after a few decades, and lost all their. That's indicative of all the border towns, I think. A lot of people live there, but they don't pay into the system, so the town just kind of dies out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it unless they help, but no help coming.
Yeah, and Dale City, Texas was one of those towns that was victim of that.
So what did you do between high school and the military? Your first stint in the military, right?
I didn't do much. I was actually in Gallup, New Mexico. I got running around with my cousins and a couple of other troublemakers, and we did a little bit of gang fighting and a little bit of busting of heads and things like that, and we got arrested, and so going up to Roosevelt, Utah, my dad kind of put me on notice. He's like, you need to stay out of trouble. And I was like, well, I just want to graduate high school and get the hell on with my life.
Right.
And he's like, well, you can't. You got one more English class. And I said, well, I'll take it during summer school and I'll get out of 16. And my dad's like, no, you need to stay in high school and just kind of chill out a little bit and stop trying to grow up so fast. Mm-hmm. But I didn't listen. I took that English class in Roosevelt, Utah. Took an American Problems class. It was Mormon. It's called American Problems, but it was the Mormon twist on all the cultural problems of the world at the time. And I took 2 hours of carpentry, and then they offered this work program where you'd leave at noon, and I went to work in the oil field. So my whole senior year, I was mostly on a work program, and they gave me the high school said, hey, you've put in a lot of hours on this work program and everything. We're going to give you a scholarship to go down to St. George, Utah, and go to the university there. It was called the Dixie Rebels. That's what I remember. They wanted me to get a 4-year degree in pouring cement and cement mixing and things like that. And I was like, yeah, no.
Does it take 4 years to learn how to do that?
No, it doesn't. The engineering of the certain chemicals and everything.
You
and
understand the science
tying
behind
the rebar and all that kind of stuff.
Behind all that
making
stuff,
the overpasses for highways, that kind of thing. I imagine it took 4 years. But I was like,
I could probably figure it out on YouTube in about 30 minutes. All right, let's pour that concrete right here.
But I was also in trouble there, because we did do a little bit of underage drinking and running around in those mountains of Utah. Fell in love with the whole mountain man era, or the whole mountain man history. So I was all into shooting black powder pistols, black powder rifles, and doing a lot with we called it farmers hunting, but they call it poaching nowadays.
Right.
But we were big into hunting, and
we were big into eating.
Yes. Learned the taste of elk and deer and
elk.
And it's beautiful, beautiful country. It's also it was named after the town Roosevelt was named after the president Theodore Roosevelt. But it's also the where the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid were. Now it's known for the Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch. Lots and lots of history there. A lot of Mormon history. My maternal side of my father, he's from the Mormons, and they tried to bring me back into the flock, and I didn't do so well. ended up getting arrested again for underage drinking, and I told the judge, I think I'm going to join the Army. So before I even graduated from high school, I'd actually looked into the Army and enlisted into the 82nd Airborne. That's all I knew, is I was going to the 82nd Airborne.
Right. Did they come up with that, or did you come up with that?
They came up with that.
Okay, fair enough.
They came up with that.
82nd, fuck knuckle.
And I wanted to go infantry. And they said, no, you're going to be a radio operator. You're going to be infantry, but you're just going to carry the radio. And I was like, yeah, whatever.
If you think about it, it's pretty much it. RTO.
Yeah, the old 05 Bravo MOS. So I graduated high school. I didn't walk through the graduation. I started a big food fight. I was a troublemaker, and
that doesn't surprise me at all.
I don't want to say a class clown. I was more of a class comedian. I wasn't doing antics, but there's a couple of us that we liked cutting up in class and causing the high school network a bunch of problems. And we didn't take high school very seriously, and so we ended up starting a food fight in the cafeteria, huge food fight. So we were told that we had to bring our parents in before we could walk through graduation. I said, not me. Here's my carpentry book back. I want my diploma, and I don't care if my parents see me go through, wear a dress or a square hat or not. I'm not doing it. So I didn't do it. So I went straight.
Did you get any more money for walking across the stage?
No.
See, there you go.
No, I ended up actually working in the oil field that day, and then showing up in the audience that night. But that's another thing, and I think a lot of kids miss that nowadays. Is a lot of kids don't work in high school, but I always had.
I had to.
I always had pockets full of money in high school. I didn't actually live with my dad. My cousin and I had rented a trailer house, but we had our own place. So I had my own truck. I had my own paycheck. Always had pockets full of money. A lot of the snitches, or I shouldn't call them snitches, but a lot of the kids in school thought I was the drug dealer in town, which was kind of ironic because I've never, being from West Texas and everything, I knew what pot was and everything like that, but I always thought it smelled like burning horse apples. I just never could put it to my mouth. I just couldn't stand it, But I stayed completely away from it, even though I was accused of being the drug dealer.
They thought he was the Walter White of West Texas.
Yeah, but I was actually going out and working for it and getting a paycheck, which was kind of funny. But I was doing pretty well, and what was kind of ironic is the guy that got drafted with my dad. He was the owner of the company, Leon Ross, and he was just like a huge mentor for me. And the guy would do anything in life. He thought, well, I'm going to go do that. And he would get the money and go do it. He bought a helicopter before he even, knew how to, took lessons to fly it. He actually owned the helicopter, and then he bumped around in it and said, well, maybe I better take some lessons on how to fly this thing. But Leon Ross was always a mentor of mine, So he just made me feel like you could accomplish anything if you're just willing to work for it. Mm-hmm. So I decided, well, I'm just going to knock out this Army thing, and I'm going to knock it out and go do my time. And I entered I went to Salt Lake City, and his Leon Ross's son, Will Ross, he was from, of course, we were both from divorced families. It was his idea, so let's go to the Army and be Green Beret snipers. And I was like, yeah,
why not?
Yeah, what is that? What's a Green Beret? What's a sniper? Oh, it's like what we do. When we go out and shoot all the time and everything. We just we just have individual. You just go out as an individual and you just shoot people. I said, okay, whatever. But
sounds good.
he went to Denver to join because he was on the Colorado side. Roosevelt, Utah is in the northeastern corner of Utah. So he went to his MEP station was Denver, and mine was Salt Lake. And when I came back from basic training at AIT and everything, I saw Will Ross, and he didn't have a buzzed head like I did. I said, well, what's going on? And he's like, oh, well, they wouldn't take me. I was flat-footed. So I ended up being all by myself, headed off to the 82nd Airborne.
Curses. He got out of it.
Yeah, he got out of it.
So I'm guessing your next stop was Fort Benning, Georgia.
For jump school. My first stop when I left, and we're talking now. Got to remember the year. I'm going on 61 years old. So this was 1981 that I left Salt Lake, and 1980 they'd just done the census. Utah still had less than 1 million people in it. It wasn't very populated at all. So I was one of the few kids from out west that showed up to Louisville, Kentucky, got off the bus. You didn't get off the plane back in those days. You got off the plane and go into the airport. You got off the bus, or I got off the plane and then got on a blue bus to head to Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Knox.
That's where I did my basic training, was Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, you were radio. I thought you were infantry there for a second. I got it. Okay, now.
No, I wanted to be infantry.
You were a radio infantry guy with a radio. I remember now.
Well, and it was before they really got organized. The Army was going through a huge transition in itself. This was right after the Jimmy Carter years, and Jimmy Carter years were not good for the Army. And so they were Fort Knox, Kentucky they still had infantry basic training there, but they also had tanker. It didn't matter what your MOS was, you're just going to do basic training. And I think it was the next year, 1982, that they started the OSIT, for infantry at Fort Benning. But we were just doing basic training there, and then they would break up the basic training class, and you get sent to wherever your AIT or
your AIT, exactly,
your
MOS was.
Yeah, so even there during basic training at Fort Knox, I was just begging, to go infantry. And I said, they kept on saying, no, you're going to go infantry, and called me a redneck. I was the one of the only guys from out west, and of course I was redheaded and blue-eyed, and so I stuck out. I had to be the guidon bearer because I stuck out in the formation of the basic training platoon, and I didn't know that there was a racial barrier. I kind of grew up West Texas, Gallup, New Mexico, Utah. We didn't have a lot of race hatred towards anybody. Everybody was just, that's who you were type thing. And then I got introduced to these race hatreds, inside the basic training, and because most of the kids were either from New York City or Cincinnati. You ever see that movie Stripes? Mm-hmm. They had just got done filming that movie when we started basic training in our same barracks, everything. So wherever you see on Stripes, that's where I went to basic training.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's the fact, Jack.
It was interesting times, and I think as a end of 9 weeks, right at the beginning of that 9th week, they took us to the theater, and we got to see the director's cut of Stripes, which made everybody laugh. That was exactly pretty much the same thing that happened to us, because our drill sergeant his name was Jefferson, and I was very, very enamored by this guy because he was a Vietnam vet like my dad, and he had the 101st combat patch, and he was in Hamburger Hill. Mm-hmm. But when we got there for basic training, he was in a sling. His arm was in a sling, and it was, I think we got into our 6th week of basic training before he admitted that he had fallen off of a moped and dislocated his shoulder. That's the reason he was in a sling, So that
not combat. He didn't just come from Vietnam and Da Nam and.
That didn't fit the storyline very well. He fell off a moped.
You'd be surprised how many stories like that are out there too.
And we lived them. We lived them. Yeah. So yeah. But basic training was a kind of an eye opener for me. I mean, I think we all come to the Army thinking that we're gonna get trained to be killers and all this other kind of stuff, and then you realize real quick that you're piling or you're peeling 2 big huge bags of potatoes,
right?
And log drills. I don't know if you had to do log drills when you were still basic training, but I never imagined a telephone pole being across my chest and doing sit-ups with them and everything like that. So, and humidity. I was from out west. I had no idea what humidity was. And that was August.
We had air.
Yeah, I worked the oil field. The oil field in Roosevelt, Utah was interesting in itself, because very austere conditions. When you'd go out there and work on the rigs, and you'd be out there 2, 3, 4 days, working on the rigs. And we bunked up in things called dog houses. And that's where you got sleep and everything. You got something to eat. But you're just covered in dust all the time. And then in the summertime, it's extremely hot. And in the wintertime, it's extremely cold. And I just could not wait to get back, get to the Army where, conditions would be better. But
so you thought.
Yeah, so I thought. So, but we still had, in 1981, we still had the straight pickle green uniforms, that you see on Forrest Gump. We had the baseball hats and green, OD green. And it was just, it was disappointing, to say the least. You expected a lot more from the Army, and it turned out to be just a bunch of idiots trying to do the same thing together. And I wasn't impressed with the people that I did basic training with. Minus 1 or 2 guys, but the rest of them were just
getting from point A to point B is a challenge.
Yeah, and it was the volunteer Army was just filling itself out. So a lot of people that joined the Army could barely damn tie their shoes, much less make their bed or anything like that. And it was pretty disappointing to be part of the whole basic training class. And I was just like, I thought, well, I probably made a mistake, but had AIT to go to. I went down to AIT, and then I was even more disappointed. It was when we ended up in Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Yes, that's where the commo guys go, right?
All the commo guys went down there.
A little warmer than Fort Knox.
A little warmer. Wintertime had passed. I'd gone home for basic training, or between basic training and AIT, I'd gone home for Christmas, and lots of snow in Roosevelt that year. When I say home, it was Roosevelt, and I was just going to go check on my dad and things like that, and hang out. Got a Dear John letter. Had a girl in high school that was supposed to marry, and I before I got back on the bus. Everything was by bus back then and everything. Before I got back on the bus to go to Salt Lake to get on the plane, I'd stop by her house with her newlywed husband, and I'd visited with them, and I visited with the parents that I already knew and everything. But then I got up to leave. I said, I got to go make the bus. And I took $100 out of my wallet, and I handed it to him. And he said, oh, you don't have to give me a wedding present and everything. I said, no, it's not a wedding present. I want you to go buy yourself a good meal and a couple drinks, and I want to thank you for keeping me from making the worst mistake of my life, right in front of everybody.
Was she in the room?
Oh yeah, the parents were and everything like that. I said,
clever. You were thinking of that for a minute.
Oh yeah, that was planned. It was planned. So I got back on the bus and I went back to Fort Gordon, Georgia. And I realized that there wasn't nothing fancy about these radios that I was working on, and I learned that back then we were still in the middle of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union was our enemy, and I thought, man, I don't understand how we can beat the Soviet Union with these radios we have, and I've seen 10 times better than the oil fields, or the generators they wanted us to use to generate electricity were all wore out and everything. And I thought, well, it's got to be better than active duty or when you get to your unit, it's got to be a lot better.